Capsule of the Stargate. By author Scott Carson. Created with Dream Press AI, the AI story co-writer. Chapter 1. As Rodney strode down the corridor of Atlantis, he couldn't help but adjust the Canadian flag on his upper arm for the 100th time. His fingers traced the stitching on the worn flag as his mind segued to the Wraith situation brewing on board. He grunted, still hung up on the idea that Todd, yes, frigging Todd, had some Wraiths on their side now. The irony was nearly too much to handle. But that was beside the point right now. Rodney shook off his thoughts and focused on the task at hand. "All right, Zelonska," he called out to his Czech companion. "What do we have here?" Radek glanced up from a bundle of wires he was attempting to untangle. "It looks like some sort of ancient technology, Rodney. I am not sure what it does." The pair had stumbled upon an undiscovered corner of Atlantis. Rodney was always fascinated by new areas and was eager to uncover their secrets. Radek looked up from the tangle of wires, his glasses precariously perched on the bridge of his nose as he adjusted them. "It is some sort of ancient device with hundreds of spots for electrical capsules. I am not sure of its function yet," he said, a hint of intrigue in his voice. Rodney rolled his eyes, his serious demeanor taking over before quickly regaining his composure, aware of his habit. "Of course, it's ancient technology." "It's always ancient technology," he replied, his tone light. Rodney crouched down next to Radek, his mind already racing with theories and possibilities. Radek chuckled, shrugging off Rodney's slight condescension. "It is intriguing, though. I wonder what this device is for. And it seems like we already have one capsule." The pair of scientists worked diligently to uncover the mystery of the device for all these capsules to be in place, but where are the rest of them? Rodney's mind continued to ponder as he observed his colleague. Radek's eyebrows furrowed in concentration as he examined the device's interior closely. His dark hair tousled and falling into his eyes until Rodney let out an audible sigh and grabbed a pen from his pocket to gently push it back. "Thank you, McKay." Radek chuckled. "No problem. I wouldn't want you to miss vital details if your vision is obscured," Rodney replied with a smirk. The two continued to work together in this mysterious section of the spaceship, with Radek leading the way in his understanding of the ancient technology while Rodney backed him up with his intellect and analytical skills. They ripped off each other effortlessly, joking and laughing even as they tried to unravel the enigma before them. It was their chemistry that made their partnership so dynamic. Their banter filled the air like a comfortable blanket, wrapping around them as they worked, making the task at hand feel less daunting. But despite the light-hearted atmosphere, Rodney couldn't shake off the looming feeling of the Wraith, who were still a present threat on Atlantis. The thought of them lurking around caused the hairs on the back of his neck to stand on end. Radek noticed the change in Rodney's demeanor. His Czech accent became more pronounced as he placed a hand on Rodney's shoulder, his gaze intense. "McKay, do not worry about the Wraith. We will handle it, just like we always do." Rodney nodded, forcing a small smile as he took in his colleague's words. He knew Radek was right. They had been in difficult situations before, and they always managed to find a way out. Their wit and intelligence were a formidable force against any obstacle. The two of them continued to work in silence for a few minutes, tinkering with the device and exchanging frustrated glances every now and then. Rodney rubbed his temples, feeling a headache coming on. He thought about the device and the only capsule they had. Maybe the capsule needs to go on the device to activate it. Radek looked up at Rodney, wearing a thoughtful expression. "It's a possibility, but we don't know what would happen if we did." Rodney let out an exaggerated sigh. "Well, what else are we supposed to do? We can't just leave this device here, we need to know what it's for." Radek nodded. "You're right, let's see what happens." Rodek carefully inserted the capsule into the device, and they both waited with bated breath. They watched as the capsule activated the device, and the machine sprang to life, emitting a soft glow. A tingling sensation started at the base of Rodney's spine, and he felt a sudden rush of pleasure as colors swirled around him as it was forming something. He glanced at Rodek, who looked equally astounded, his eyes wide behind his glasses. Rodney's breath caught in his throat as the energy pulsed through him, making him feel alive and invigorated. Rodek looked at him, his gaze intense as they shared a moment of discovery and wonder in this secluded corner of Atlantis. Suddenly, the energy began to create what looked like a map of every galaxy. Rodney and Rodek were both fascinated as they watched the interstellar map formed in the air in front of them. The room was filled with a soft glow, giving everything an almost ethereal appearance. Rodney felt a full body shiver as the energy continued to pulsate, and Rodek took a step closer to him, their proximity a welcome distraction from the intensity of the moment. Their breathing became audible, syncing together as they watched the intergalactic map unfurling before them. Then that one capsule had specifically started to point towards some uncharted galaxy on the map. Rodney and Rodek exchanged a look of bewilderment and intrigue at the same time. "What do you think that means?" Rodek asked, taking a step closer to Rodney as they both admired the ancient device and the map before them. Rodney's scientific mind was already running a million miles a minute with the possibilities. "I think it's trying to tell us something," Rodney said, his eyes never straying from the map. Rodek followed his gaze, his eyebrows furrowing in concentration. "It is," Rodek agreed. "But what?" Rodney bit his lower lip in thought. "We need to do more research." Rodek nodded, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "Yes, more research is needed." Rodney could hear the thrill in Rodek's voice, and his own excitement mounted. He loved finding new knowledge and discovering the mystery behind objects, especially if they were mysterious devices left behind by ancient civilizations. "We need to get this information back to the team, they need to see this," Rodney said, already mentally formulating the proper way to present their findings in a way that would make sense to the rest of the Atlantis crew, yes, and inform Richard Woosley that we have discovered something and get a message back to Samantha Carter back on Earth. Rodek nodded in agreement, his eyes still locked onto the map. "You are right, we should tell the rest of the team about this. This could be something big." The two of them worked up until the early hours of the morning to understand what the capsule and device were trying to tell them. They took turns writing down their thoughts and findings, both occasionally talking about the device and what it could mean. Rodney commented on the device's texture, feeling the smooth and cold surface of the object. It reminded him of one of the ancient devices they found on Atlantis before, but this one seemed more advanced. "This thing is ancient, all right. I can feel it," Rodney said, half joking. His curiosity piqued, he glanced at Rodek, who was sitting a few feet away, engrossed in his tablet. Rodney approached him and looked over his shoulder. "What are you working on?" Rodney asked. Rodek looked up and smiled, his glasses slightly crooked. "Ah, Rodney, I am just trying to cross-reference this device with some other ancient technology we have on file. See if there are any commonalities that could provide some insight into its function." Rodney nodded, impressed by Rodek's thoroughness and attention to detail. His Czech colleague's ability to balance his obvious intelligence with a relaxed demeanor often left Rodney in awe. He found himself learning from Rodek's approach and admired the way they could work together to solve even the most complex puzzles. Then he got on his comm badge. "Woolsey, me and Rodek have discovered something within one of the rooms in the Atlantis ship." A moment passed before the channel opened and the calm, collected voice of Richard Woosley answered, "Go ahead, Rodney." "Well, we have this ancient device here with hundreds of electric capsules to locate. We've activated one of them and it seems to have started some sort of cosmic map." There's also something peculiar happening with the device that we can't quite figure out yet, but we're working on it. Rodney replied, hoping that his enthusiasm would translate over the intercom. Very interesting, Rodney. Keep me posted on your progress. Richard replied, his tone, still calm, but Rodney could hear a note of intrigue. Rodek smiled, nodding in acknowledgement before returning to his table and his tablet to resume his research. Rodney walked around the room observing every single corner, looking for any other hidden clues about the device. He knew there had to be more to it. Who puts a device with hundreds of capsules on it without any explanation of what it does or where it comes from? Rodney had gotten back onto his comm badge. Oh, Woosley, can you please inform LT Colonel Carter back on Earth and send her a message on what we have discovered? I'll make sure to pass that along, Rodney, Richard responded, his tone holding a hint of amusement. Rodney chuckled, shaking his head slightly as he replied, "Thank you, Richard." Rodney and Rodek spent the rest of the evening documenting their findings, taking notes and sending them off to Richard, and making a note to reach out to Samantha back on Earth. But the excitement of their discoveries was tempered with the lingering worry of the Wraith threat, who were still at large on Atlantis. Rodney's mind constantly drifted to the danger that could be lurking around every corner, and he couldn't help but feel a sense of unease as he continued to analyze the device. Rodek, ever the optimist, tried to keep the mood light, engaging Rodney in playful banter and reminding him to take breaks when needed. Their friendship was a constant source of comfort and support for each other, and it showed in their interactions. Rodney couldn't help but feel grateful to have Rodek as a colleague and friend. Even if they had their moments of disagreement, he knew that Rodek had his back. As the night wore on, the two scientists found themselves lost in the mystery of the device, their exhaustion giving way to fascination. They exchanged theories and ideas, their conversation flowing easily as they worked to unlock the secrets of the ancients. Finally, with a sigh of relief, Rodney and Rodek finished their work for the night. Rodek stretched his arms above his head, a yawn escaping his lips as he glanced over at his Canadian friend. "Bedtime, Rodney?" he asked, his voice gentle and coaxing. Rodney nodded, rubbing his tired eyes before standing up and stretching as well. Their tired bodies reminded them of their exhaustion from the day's work, their minds still racing with thoughts of their discoveries. As they walked towards their sleeping quarters, Rodney found himself lost in thought. The strange energy that had pulsed through him earlier in the evening still lingered in the back of his mind. What did it all mean? He couldn't shake off the feeling that there was more to it than just a simple ancient device. Rodney glanced over at Rodek, who was deep in thought as well. He couldn't help but admire his colleague's tenacity and dedication. Rodek's curiosity and intellect were a perfect match for Rodney's analytical mind, and they made a great team in solving the mysteries of Atlantis. As they reached their sleeping quarters, Rodney couldn't help but steal one last glance at the ancient device, bewildered by the strange energy that had surged through him earlier in the day. It was a mystery that he was determined to uncover, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, Samantha Carter was back on Earth receiving the information that Rodney had sent to her, when Todd back on the Atlantis was advising Colonel John Shepard about one of the Wraith with a super hive ship. But Lieutenant Colonel Carter was reading what Richard had sent to her about some discovery that Rodney McKay and Rodek Zelonska made in some unknown area of the ship Atlantis. As Carter read the message, her heart raced with excitement. The discovery of the cosmic map and the activation of the capsule was a breakthrough. But deep down, a feeling of unease persisted, knowing Rodney, there would be some danger involved. Samantha tried to shake off the feeling, her scientific mind took over, and she pored over the research and notes that were attached. The data was mind-boggling, and she couldn't believe the extent of the discovery. She spent the entire day on Earth engrossed in the information, poring over every detail, and making notes. Samantha realized that this could potentially change everything they knew about the Pegasus galaxy, and even the universe itself. As the Daedalus was arriving to the ship Atlantis, Commander Stephen Caldwell couldn't wait to assemble the upcoming meeting with the top members of the crew of Atlantis. He quickly gathered his belongings and rushed to the Atlantis outpost, unable to contain his excitement and the ancients. What other secrets did they hold, and what did it all mean for humanity? As he entered the outpost, he immediately set to work, calling upon the team to gather and discuss their findings. He couldn't wait to see the looks on their faces when they realized the significance of what Rodney and Rodek had discovered. Meanwhile, back on Atlantis, Rodney and Rodek were still in a deep comfortable sleep within their own beds. The discovery of the device and the strange energy had left a lasting impact on them both. But Woosley was wondering, with the information that he had received from Rodney and Rodek, plus the device had pinpointed an area in some uncharted galaxy, to him it looked like a puzzle. Rodney and Rodek had discovered a key, but they didn't yet know what door it opened. Back on Atlantis, Rodney and Rodek had finally surfaced from their thoughts and woken up from their sleep the following morning. They were able to focus again fully on the task at hand. The two scientists had their own routines in approaching problems and finding solutions. Woosley had sent a message back to Dr. McKay and Dr. Zelonska to see if this first capsule could be a puzzle piece. Rodney was fully awake now. He sat up in his bed, the sheets tangled around his legs as he tried to shake off the slumber. He knew that this discovery was more crucial than they initially thought, and it needed further investigation. He got up and made his way to the research lab where he knew Rodek would also be headed to, hoping to find some answers and maybe a way to unlock the secrets of the device. But Rodney was inside his quarters and there was a message on his highly advanced tablet that every crew member of Atlantis had one of these devices. Woosley's message contained what they found could be a puzzle piece, a hint towards the possibility that this device was meant to be activated by multiple capsules, and that this first one was just the beginning. Rodney's heart raced as he pondered the possibilities. This could be a game changer in their understanding of Atlantis and its creators. But little did he know, this discovery would not only change their understanding of the ancients but also awaken desires that had long been dormant within him. As Rodney approached the research lab, he saw Rodek already there, hunched over the device, a determined look on his face. Rodney knew that look all too well. It was a look of pure focus and determination. He approached his colleague with a newfound energy, his mind buzzing with excitement. "Rodek, what have we got?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Rodek looked up, a small smile playing on his lips as he gestured for Rodney to come closer. "Ah, McKay, you're just in time. I think I might have figured out how this device works." He pointed towards the capsule that was still inserted in the device, indicating the glowing lines that were emanating from it and connecting to various parts of the machine. Rodney's eyes widened in excitement as he looked at the device. "That's incredible, Rodek. What did you do?" Rodek shrugged, his tone casual as he explained his findings. "I was just tinkering around with it, and I accidentally triggered this energy surge, and that first capsule is somehow linked up to whatever is in that uncharted galaxy," Rodek said, pride shining in his eyes. Rodney smiled, genuinely impressed. "Well, now we have something to work with." The two men fell into a comfortable silence, lost in their thoughts as they gazed upon the glowing lines, tracing the intricate pathways of the device. Dr. Zelonska looked at Rodney before saying, "I think it's a beginning of a puzzle, Rodney." Rodney's eyes sparkled with excitement. "A puzzle, yes. We must find the other pieces, Rodek." Rodek nodded. "That's what I'm thinking. These capsules could be scattered all over on some other Stargate worlds. We must find them." Rodney's mind raced with possibilities. If they could find all the capsules, they could activate the device fully, and they would be able to discover the secrets that the ancients had left behind for them. But then Rodney responded with a scientific look at Rodek. A puzzle, you know Rodek, even Richard Woosley thinks that this ancient's device could be a puzzle. Dr. Zelonska blinked, slightly surprised. Really, he said that? Rodney nodded, yes he did. He thinks that this first capsule that we have activated is just the start of it, and that there are other pieces to this puzzle scattered throughout many of these galaxies. The Czech scientist looked at the device, deep thought etched on his features as he mulled over the implications. But before he could respond, their routine comm device on their nifty tablets went off, and the voice of Richard Woosley filled the room. Doctors McKay and Zelonska, I hate to interrupt your little exploration, but I have some information for you, he said, his tone unreadable. Rodney shot Rodek a bemused look before answering, go ahead, Richard. What's up? As you know, we've been tracking the movements of those Wraith you encountered earlier. Right now, Shepard is with Todd, and we have learned that there's some super hive Wraith ship on its way to Earth. Break off on the work on that discovery on this device and the one capsule you have, Rodney. You had mentioned about some breakthrough concept for a wormhole drive. Richard's voice interrupted, all business. We need all hands on deck as soon as possible to plan a counter-attack against this Wraith threat. Can you be ready that wormhole drive? Rodney frowned, his excitement over their discovery dampened by the sudden urgency of the situation. Understood, Richard. We'll be ready. He turned to Rodek and let out a sigh. Looks like our discovery will have to wait. Duty calls. Rodek nodded in agreement. That is unfortunate, Rodney. But we can always come back to this later. Rodek clapped a hand on his shoulder, offering him a reassuring smile. For now, let's focus on stopping this Wraith threat. We cannot afford to have them reach Earth. It would be catastrophic. Rodney nodded, knowing that Rodek was right. As much as he wanted to explore this discovery further, there were more pressing matters at hand. He turned back to their device, his mind racing with ideas for the wormhole drive. Rodney never backed down from a challenge, especially when it came to saving the lives of the people he cared about. His mind was sharp, and his intellect was unmatched, but even so, there was a heavy weight in his chest. He knew how dangerous Wraith ships could be, and if they made it to Earth, the consequences would be dire. Rodek's face was serious, his brown eyes filled with determination as they headed toward the control room. Rodney knew that he had to set aside his excitement over their discovery and focus on the task at hand. The two scientists joined the rest of the team, who were busy planning their defense against the Wraiths. Colonel John Shepard, the military leader of the Atlantis expedition, was deep in conversation with Todd, the Wraith who had previously allied himself with the team. Richard Woosley was hunched over a control panel, inputting data into his tablet. Commander Stephen Caldwell was there as well as Ronan Dex, Tilla Imagan, and Carson Beckett. Rodney's eyebrow arched at the sight of Todd, who had once been a deadly foe but was now an ally of the team. Rodney took a deep breath and put aside any reservations he may have about working with the Wraith. He knew that the stakes were high, and they couldn't afford any distractions. Rodek and Rodney quickly got to work, providing valuable insights and ideas to the team. Todd offered his knowledge of Wraith tactics and technology, while Richard provided crucial data from the Atlantis database. John listened intently to everyone's input, taking in all the information before making a crucial decision. The tension in the room was palpable as everyone worked tirelessly to find a solution. Amidst the chaos, Rodney and Rodek's minds continued to whirl with their discovery in the back of their minds. They knew that they had stumbled upon something extraordinary, something that could potentially change the course of history. But for now, they had to push that thought aside and focus on the immediate threat. As they worked, Rodney couldn't help but think about the possibilities that the device held. He had a feeling that there was more to it than just a simple discovery. The way the capsule had activated, the energy surge, and the connection to an uncharted galaxy, it all seemed too significant to be a mere coincidence. But for now, Rodney had to set that thought aside and focus on helping to defend against the incoming Wraith threat. Todd, despite his past as a formidable enemy, had allied himself with the Atlantis crew. Rodney had to admit, the Wraith's knowledge proved invaluable as they formulated a plan to combat the super-hive Wraith ship that was heading towards Earth. The team worked tirelessly, staying up late into the night to ensure that they were prepared for the attack. As they neared the end of their preparations, Rodney couldn't help but feel a spark of excitement. Richard Woosley began discussing a plan with Colonel John Shepard. John the First have been discussing this with Commander Stephen Caldwell of the Daedalus to see what we can do to slow down the super-hive ship that is already on its way to Earth. Anything that you like to add, John? Yes, Commander Caldwell is using the long-range sensors of the Daedalus to monitor the Wraith ship's speed. I've suggested using the Asgard beaming weapons to disable their engines and send them off course, but we'll need to wait until they're in range. He turns to Rodney. What's the status on that wormhole drive? Would that help speed up our counterattack? Rodney was still trying to wrap his mind around this sudden change of events. He knew that the stakes were high, and the situation was dire, but he couldn't help but feel a thrill at the prospect of testing out their newly designed wormhole drive in the heat of battle. Ah, Colonel, yes, the wormhole drive. Well, the good news is that we've made significant progress in its development. We've integrated the ancient technology into the ship's systems, and we've been able to create a stable, self-sustaining wormhole, Rodney replied confidently. Hopefully the wormhole drive will get Atlantis back to Earth in a matter of seconds, giving us a strategic advantage. But Rodney couldn't keep the excitement out of his voice. He had never felt so alive, so invigorated. It was as though everything that he had been working towards in his life had led to this moment. Rodek, on the other hand, was more subdued in his response. Well, it's about time we had some luck on our side, Rodney, he said lightly, but there was a hint of unease in his voice. Rodek never handled situations involving the Wraith well. He was a scientist, after all, not a soldier. But he put on a brave face, nodding in agreement with Rodney. He trusted his friend, and he knew that Rodney was the best possible person to have in charge in this situation. With a final glance at the device, Rodek followed Rodney and the rest of the team to the control room, where they would launch their counterattack. As they were en route to the control room, Rodney pulled Rodek aside for a moment. Meanwhile, John Shepard was thinking, what about the F-302's fighters, and couldn't we arm them with nuclear warheads and take the Daedalus back to Earth while Rodney and Rodek are finishing up the wormhole drive? That's not a half-bad idea, Shepard. Stephen Caldwell interjected, stroking his chin in thought. Well, this is one of those rare moments where I happen to agree with you, Commander Caldwell, John replied with a crooked smile. John was a soldier, and while he appreciated the value of scientific advances, he knew that sometimes the oldest methods were the most effective. Meanwhile, here on Atlantis, Rodney and Rodek are going to work on activating the wormhole drive. If all goes well, Atlantis will arrive back on Earth in a matter of seconds. It's a risky move, but it's our best shot at surprise. Richard nodded. Understood, John. I'll make sure to relay the message to both Rodney and Rodek. Godspeed, Daedalus, Richard said, as he gave the order for the F-302's fighters to launch and for the Daedalus to make its way back to Earth. Meanwhile, in the hallway, Rodney spoke to Rodek in a low tone. Rodek, I know you're not a soldier, but I need you by my side now more than ever. I can't do this alone. Rodek looked at his Canadian friend, his dark eyes filled with determination. He had always respected Rodney, and he knew that he was the right person to lead them in this moment of crisis. Of course, Rodney. You can count on me, Rodek said, patting his friend on the shoulder reassuringly. Rodney nodded, relieved. Good. Now, let's prepare ourselves for what's to come. John Shepard gave the final orders, and the Atlantis team moved quickly, efficiently, and with purpose. Each of them was in their element, working with a single-minded determination to complete their tasks. Radek and Rodney, on the other hand, were headed towards the engine room, their minds still whirling with thoughts of the ancient device they had discovered. Rodney, you're sure that this device is safe, right? Radek asked, a hint of skepticism in his voice. Rodney chuckled, a familiar twinkle in his eyes. Radek, have I ever steered us wrong before? Radek rolled his eyes, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Just once, Rodney, but let's not get into that right now. Rodney grinned, his mind still focused on the task at hand. No time for jokes now, Radek. We need to get this wormhole drive activated as soon as possible. The two scientists made their way to the engine room, Radek's mind still spinning with Rodney's words. He had been with the Canadian scientist for many years now, and he had seen him make many impressive discoveries. But this discovery of the ancient device and the activation of the capsule, it all seemed too extraordinary to be true.